Welcome to Nutrition Nuts, where we discuss the latest nutrition breakthroughs, supplements, and wellness choices with leaders in the natural products industry, health practitioners, and research scientists. I'm your host, Jim Wilkes, certified nutritionist. Thanks to our main sponsor, HollyHillVitamins.com, the place for great selection, service, and prices. Check out their extensive wellness library for updated science-based info. Hey, everybody. Thanks again for joining us today on Nutrition Nuts. I am your host, nutritionist Jim Wilk, and just pleased to have people listening and sharing their concerns about health and nutritional supplements and whatever's going on out there. It's crazy out there, huh? Today, we're going to be talking with Cheryl Myers, and I'll give you her bio in just a minute, but I thought we'd pick a couple of issues that are really affecting our population, right? Sugar is one of them. You read about it all the time, but gosh, folks, I've been reading about it for 30, 40 years here, how sugar is really such a poison in our lives, and especially in the U.S. here. There's so much going on with diabetes, right? It's becoming like epidemic, pre-diabetes, people with insulin resistance and things. So I think Cheryl has some great ideas on how to control your sugar. I know I have personal problems with it. I just recent blood test. I'm still at that borderline with my glucose levels, even though I eat a pretty clean diet and I rarely have any kind of processed sugars in my body. The most I get is from maybe some fruit, and once in a while have a treat here and there. But I have to watch it. My A1C is a little high too, and in fact, I'm taking a product now that we're going to discuss today with Cheryl. So I personally have to watch this. I think it's in my family. Sugar problems have been a lot of my kinfolk. I've had issues with that. So I'm going to learn a little something along with you today. We're also going to be talking about thyroid and adrenal concerns too. I know iodine's a big thing right now too. So for your immune system, for everything, that's going to be important as well. So I hope everybody's enjoying the spring out there. I hope you're getting out. I'm hoping you're going to be exercising more. I think that's super important. Along with eat and taking a few good supplements, we should all be doing all right. I'd like to thank our sponsor, once again, HollyHillVitamins.com. So you can pick up some of the items we talked today. A lot of times we'll be having some great deals on things. So please check out the website there. You can see my my wonderful face there and some other people too. Let me just give you a little short bio on Cheryl Myers too, our guest today. She is the Chief of Scientific Affairs for Europharma Incorporated, and she's a healthcare professional with certifications in cancer, pain control, and issues of aging. She's an expert in dietary supplements and natural medicines, and she's been a featured guest on hundreds of radio and television shows. I think she did my radio show many years ago. She has been interviewed by the New York Times, Prevention Magazine, the Wall Street Journal. She's a member of the editorial board of the Natural Medicine Journal. And her own published research has included topics such as menopause, diabetes, sleep disorders, and gastrointestinal function. As an expert educator on natural medicine, Cheryl has been invited to give educational presentations at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and the Jefferson Myrna Brin Center of Integrative Medicine at Thomas Jefferson University Hospital in Philadelphia, right next door to us here, and a lot of other healthcare organizations across America. I followed Cheryl many times in trade magazines in the industry and some of her articles, and that's why I'm excited to have her on. And without further ado, here we go. Cheryl, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Well, I'm really delighted to be there, finally.
Finally, right? Yeah, folks, we were having a little communication problem there, but she's in Wisconsin, and then I'm here in Philly, and we made it happen here, so it's great. And I'm glad you're calling. Glad you took time out of your busy schedule there. I was telling the folks I had you on my show many years ago, and when I was doing the old fashioned radio, and for kids, that was something you used to dial, actually, in the old days. And it was always live, so it was always scary. Like if this thing happened during the live show, I would have, usually freak out. But now, since we were recording, it's much less pressure. And I followed Cheryl so many times over the years. I've read her articles in a lot of the health food industry's trade journals and things, and I always enjoy reading your stuff, Cheryl. It's always informative, and I always look forward to seeing your name in the byline there. So appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I sure appreciate that.
No problem. I told the audience today I want to talk a little bit about all I see is stuff about sugar problems. I've been hearing that for all the years I've been involved in the health food industry. I mean, I always knew that sugar was no good, and people tried to get away from it, and they started making Coke without sugar and things like that. They put other artificial sweeteners in. But it seems like the whole diabetes thing, the whole pre-diabetes, the people with insulin resistance and things like that, it just still seems to increase in our population here. I mean, what the heck is going on?
Well, I think there's a lot of things going on. And one of the things has to do with the fact that our diet has changed so dramatically. And I know that you mentioned like the diet soft drinks and such, but it turns out that some of those artificial sweeteners can also wreak havoc on our blood sugars. When we look at the vast amount of problems with our diet, the sheer volume of sugar that's in our food, it's just mind-boggling. And we're eating 2.5 times the carbohydrates as people ate of refined carbohydrates as people ate in the 1970s. I mean, for me, that's living memory, right?
Right.
So we've had some dramatic dietary changes. I think some of the big drivers have to do with our Franken foods. Putting sugars into things that you don't necessarily expect to find sugar, like salad dressings and ketchup, and it all has a cumulative effect, spaghetti sauce, etc. But the other thing has to do with, sweetened sodas. People drink an awful lot of sweetened sodas, especially some of the energy drinks that have either the artificial sweeteners or the huge load of sugar on them, along with lots and lots of caffeine. So the list goes on. So it's not just sugar, it's refined carbohydrates. So I heard a professor speak one time, and she said, if it's white, you shouldn't eat it unless it's cauliflower.
I like that.
I do too. White bread, white pizza crust, white bagels, white dinner rolls. A lot of these things are what we call refined carbohydrates, which means they've had their fiber removed. And when you remove the fiber, it changes the flavor. It makes it, sometimes some people find it more palatable. A lot of people like cakes and, with the refined carbohydrates and the white flour. So, I mean, it's not that it doesn't taste good, but the problem is our bodies are not used to this. We are Stone Age bodies walking around in a George Jetson kind of world. So we've got all these modern things that are happening and huge changes in the diet. But deep down inside, our bodies and our genetics, they still respond to the world as if we were still living in caves. So back in the day, we did not have access to all these kinds of refined carbohydrate foods. In fact, we didn't have access to this variety of food. We didn't have access to this volume of food. And we are deeply bred to eat, because the people who fought the hardest to eat were the ones that survived and had children. And so we are really programmed to not let much get between us and the tech wagon. Yeah. And that's a real problem, because now we're in this situation where people are continuing to get this hormonal stimulation from the pancreas, from the thyroid, from all of the different glands in our body, and and the creation of certain hormones that dictate hunger in the presence of food that's mostly really bad for us. When I went to college many years ago, went to Purdue, go Boilermakers. Please let's not talk about the last basketball game.
I saw that.
Awful. But, back when I went to school, when you talked about type 2 diabetes, we didn't even really much call it type 2. We called it sugar diabetes.
Right.
And it was really old people. And you would say, oh, this 85-year-old grandma, she's just, she really likes her cakes, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Better cut back on those cookies because her sugar's getting really bad. And it was just a disease of aging. But now we're seeing type 2 diabetes in kids that are 8, 9, and 10 years old because of the ridiculous changes to our diet. There's a lot of other factors. We could probably do a 2-day seminar on what's happened to the food source and what's happened to the hormones in children's bodies and the amount of fat that accumulates in children's bodies.
Right.
And what that has to do with the ongoing problems with type 2 diabetes. So now we're seeing it younger and younger ages. They're predicting by 2030, half of the adults in America will have either prediabetes or diabetes if we don't do something about it. This is an epidemic. We don't talk about it as much. I mean, folks like us do, I suppose, but you don't hear about it as much every day because people are starting to take it for granted. Oh, my sugar's high, I'll take a pill. Oh, my sugar's high, I'm going to have to start on insulin. People are almost starting to accept it as an unavoidable consequence of aging. It's just absolutely not the truth. We develop problems with type 2 diabetes when our cells start to have problems letting the insulin get inside. So our pancreas makes this hormone called insulin. And insulin is a taxicab. Insulin's job is it picks up sugar out of the bloodstream and it takes it to its destination. So it goes to the cell and it hits the garage door opener. And the garage door goes up and the insulin taxicab pulls inside and lets its passenger out. So that's in a perfectly functioning body. So all the sugar goes from the bloodstream and that's carried by the insulin into the cell. And the cell uses that sugar as fuel to do what it needs to do. So if it's a heart cell, it's for the heart cell to beat. And if it's for a brain cell, it's for the brain cell to fire those neurons. And if it's for the stomach, it's to help with digestion, or for the liver to filtrate. There's all of these wonderful things that our cells do. But like every machine and like everything in the universe, it requires energy. And the fuel for that energy is the sugar that's in our bloodstream. Now, that doesn't mean you eat Snickers bar and that's good for you. But it's the carbohydrates that you eat get turned into sugars that the body uses for energy. So what happens when the taxicab picks up the sugar and it drives up to the cell and it hits the garage door opener? And maybe the garage door only goes up halfway. Or maybe only some of the sugar inside the taxicab can squeeze in. And the rest just has to keep driving around in the taxicab. What if it comes up to a cell and the garage door doesn't go up at all? And then the taxicab has to back up down the driveway and continue driving around the highway. So bad things happen. That's insulin resistance. Bad things happen when we can't get insulin carrying its passengers inside our cells. Number one, the sugar just keeps circulating in our bloodstream. And as it circulates in our bloodstream, our body says, wait a minute, this is not being burned for energy. Maybe the body doesn't need it. If the body doesn't need it, I'm going to keep it for later. And so the body turns that sugar into fat called adipose tissue. So you start to accumulate fat because the body says, well, if you don't need this sugar, I'm just going to save it for later. And you start to increase your fat deposits. The second thing that happens is your cells start to starve to death. So ironically, type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance is a disease where people usually have more and more fat on their body while their cells are starving to death. So what we need to do is to try to get some of those blood sugars down and improve the problem so that the insulin can get inside the cell.
I think, Cheryl, that people still think that they don't correlate the sugar becoming, turning it, like your fat's not getting burned, the sugar's getting burned, the fat's getting left behind. People think that eating fat will make you fatter still, even though it's been shown that not to be true to some extent. Am I correct? Or
absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course, if you're eating fat, especially the wrong kinds of fat, then it's making up the majority of your calories. Yeah, you're unless you're a super athlete that's working out and burning 10,000 calories a day, you're probably going to start to gain weight. You can gain weight on anything. But when we look at the accidental weight gain, it's the eating the carbohydrates that get turned into the sugar that can't get inside the cell. And then your body says, hey, what am I going to do with this? I know. I'm going to tuck it back in the storage room. And that storage room is usually on your bottom or in your abdomen or in your thighs.
Right.
Yeah, and some other bad things happen too. I sound like the voice of doom and gloom, but other bad things that happen is you start to accumulate fat in your liver as well. So this is another problem that we're seeing is more and more people are struggling with fatty liver. And the fat in the liver interferes with the liver's normal functioning. And we call that non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, NAFLD. And that is also in tandem with type 2 diabetes, just skyrocketing with regards to the number of people that are struggling with fatty liver. And fatty liver starts to impair liver function. And if we don't reverse it, it can go on to become more serious forms of liver disease, some of which can be fatal. So they're estimating that probably half of individuals over the age of 60 in America have some level of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease because of the fact that we have extraordinary difficulties with the metabolism of carbohydrates.
Yeah, some of the complications of diabetes. I think a lot of people know about a lot of times it causes some nerve damage, but what are some of the other things? I mean, I'm sure there's a cardio or kidney thing maybe, or.
Oh gosh, yes. So when we look at problems with brain function, for example, we see that high levels of blood sugar interferes with brain function. It can cause brain irritation and oxidative stress in the brain. Now, that's important to notice because that's also a factor in major depressive disorder. So it's ironic that some of the same risk factors for major depressive disorder are also risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. So it's almost like you get the unfortunate double whammy because you're constantly having this irritation. Sugar irritates. If it's too high, it irritates. Back in the olden days, if somebody was really evil and they wanted to harm someone, they put sugar in their gas tank.
Right.
It would tear up the car,
You're right.
So, so that's kind of what we do when we put, sugar is like Goldilocks from the Three Bears, You don't want it to be too hard or too soft. You don't want it to be too hot or too cold. You want everything to be just right. So we don't want low blood sugar, but for the vast, vast, vast majority of Americans, that's not an issue. We want it to be in the Goldilocks zone, which is just right, enough to do what you need to do without being turned into fat. But unfortunately, too many people are on the other end of the spectrum, and they are getting first in their diet, they're getting way too many simple carbohydrates. And in addition to that, they're not metabolizing it very well.
Cheryl, so is there I think I mentioned early before you came on that my sugar levels, when I have them tested, they're borderline. I mean, I think the range is anywhere from from 80 to 150, and I borderline around 99 or so. And but I have a family history of it. My father, my brother. There's a genetic component, you think, to it at all?
Well, of course, there can be a genetic. It's not caused by genetics. It's not like your genetics are damaged. But some people are just better at others than dealing with carbohydrates, and we see that all the time. I have a friend who eats granola bars and cookies and cereal, and loves white French bread with dinners, and and drinks soft drinks and doesn't carry an extra ounce. And then I've got other friends that are eating tomatoes and lettuce and carrots and and everything they do, they're just getting more and more fatigued, and they're starting to have more and more problems with, the pain in their feet, and their blood sugar just keeps going up and up and up, So there's definitely genetic components to this, but it's not your destiny, even if you do have some genetics. And by the way, your 99 is very good. 99 is not bad. I always say 80 to 100 is in the best range for fasting blood sugar. Between 100 and 150 or 140, they call that pre-diabetes.
Gotcha.
That means your body's starting to show some symptoms of not metabolizing carbohydrates correctly. And as a result of that, your blood sugar isn't being taken care of the way it's supposed to. I actually am not sure there is such a thing as pre-diabetes. I just think it's mild diabetes. I mean, you're already showing that your body's not doing what it needs to do. Once you start to get up above 140, 150 on a regular level, their doctors that you're seeing are probably going to take some kind of intervention to try to get your blood sugars down. Now they may start with diet and weight loss if possible. Right. I think weight loss is a tricky thing, but after, and if that doesn't work, then they're going to start talking medication.
Now the A1C, that's more of an average over a period of time, right? When you get A1C levels.
Yeah, I really like the hemoglobin A1C because fasting blood sugars, I always say fasting blood sugars are a snapshot. They're what's going on at this moment in time, and they can vary quite a bit. But the hemoglobin A1C is more like a movie. It doesn't show you just what's going on at this moment. It's showing you what happened before, what happened during, that sort of thing. It looks back in time. And the hemoglobin A1C looks at the last 4 or 5 weeks. It's called glycosylated hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a compound in your bloodstream, and it's how much sugar is it accumulating? How much sugar is it sticking to? And that's a measure of what your average blood sugars have been over the past, as I said, 4 or 5 weeks. So normal would be about under 5.6. Pre-diabetes is in that 5.7 to 6.4 score. But if you're running a hemoglobin A1C at 6.5 or higher, you're diagnosed with full-on diabetes. Now, if we can get that hemoglobin A1C score down one single point, that is equal to, on average, a 19% reduction in cataract, 16% reduction in risk of heart failure, and a whopping 43% reduction in risk for amputation or death from peripheral vascular disease.
Wow.
So it's important to pay attention to these numbers and really try to work on them.
Well, I found an interesting product by Europharma. Terry Naturally is the brand name. Europharma is the parent company. But Terry Naturally makes a great product. And when he came out with that product, it was a couple of years now. I never heard of this herb called Hintonia. That's Hintonia, Hintonia. And because I've, my whole life I've been in the health food stores, and you see milk thistle and you see chamomile, but Hintonia was just something out of the blue here. How did Terry come about finding this?
Well, there is this plant. The full name of it is Hintonia latiflora, and it grows in harsh conditions. So sometimes it's the plants that grow in the really harsh conditions, that harsh environment to develop all the protective compounds because they're trying to protect themselves, and then they confer some of that protection onto us. So it's a small tree. Also grows in the southwestern United States in some areas. And they found that the people that live there used the bark of the tea as a tonic. So back in the olden days, people were into drinking your spring tonic or having a tea every now and then for just kind of keep you healthy.
Right.
German scientists a long time ago, 60 years ago, had heard about this and were wondering, well, what are these compounds in this Hintonia latiflora bark that people are swearing that it provides health benefits when they drink it as a tea? So they started to investigate it, and they found a compound in the bark called deuterogenin. And deuterogenin is really, really good at helping to reduce insulin resistance and helping to improve blood sugar metabolism. They started to do some experiments with this Hintonia latiflora extract in Germany. They created a product that in Germany is called Sucontrol D, and it was sold on the market for decades for individuals that were concerned about their blood sugar metabolism. It has several, I think it's over 20 published trials now, looking at how it works, how long does it take to work, and what kind of things can be expected.
Right. It's an amazing story behind it. And, I know the Terry Naturally, they, first of all, folks, they guarantee their products. So you can try them, and if you're not satisfied in any way, you get your money back, which is pretty cool. Not many companies do that. And for people who don't know Terry, he's been on the show before. Terry Lemeron is a man who's traveled the world, and that's what he does. He travels the world and finds scientific evidence of certain plants and constituents that can help your health. And he tirelessly has been doing this for many, many years and has formulated over 400 products in the health food industry. And he's just and still going strong in his 80s. So, God bless him. He's working more than I want to. But I know the Sucontrol D is the name of the product. Do you know what the D stands for? I never found that. It's Sucontrol with the letter D. Sucontrol, SU.
Yeah, I think in Germany when they launched the product, they set the D for diabetes.
I gotcha.
But this is really interesting. There was a published human clinical trial done in Germany on Sucontrol D, and it was on 188 people, human clinical trial. And the individuals in this trial were all in the diabetes, pre-diabetes range. Now, every one of them had a dietary changes protocol. So everybody had the intervention of you're going to start eating less refined carbohydrates and controlling your calories a little bit. So everybody was on this, diet to help reduce. Some of the folks were also on oral medications to try to get their blood glucose down. And some of the folks were even on insulin trying to get their blood sugar down. And a few unfortunate folks were on both oral medication and insulin. So you've got this 178 people, all with this problems with blood sugar metabolism, all in the diabetic range. And they were already being treated either with diet, oral drugs, injectable drugs, or both. And so they started to use the German protocol Control D, and they used it for 8 months. And over the course of 8 months, even though they were already being treated, they saw their hemoglobin A1C go down another 11% beyond what was already happening with their treatment. They saw the fasting blood glucose go down another 23%. They saw the diabetic complications like neuropathies, burning, prickling, itching, sweating, excessive thirst, excessive urination over the course of 8 months go down a whopping 73%. And at the end of the study, half the participants taking medication were able to reduce the dosage, and some were able to stop the medication use completely. But please don't throw your medicine out the window and say, Cheryl said to do this. No, this was under the supervision of doctors during the course of a clinical study where people are being watched very carefully. But I think it does show us that if we can help get the body back into better balance with regards to how it manages the sugar that we throw at it, that we can have tremendous benefits.
Wow. It's amazing, folks. I'm taking it myself now. When I saw that, I just want to get my sugar because I know it, like you said, it's probably not causing it by genes, but it's mentally. I think I should always keep it. I think it takes your cravings away for sweets too. I found that to be beneficial as well there. So it's an amazing product. Folks, you can always go to hollyhillvitamins.com. We have a bunch of books called Diabetes is Optional. It's by Jacob Teitelbaum, he's one of the most quoted, they say, integrative medical authorities in the world. And he was on the show many years ago, my old radio show. And it's a nice book along with Terry Lemeron talking about Hintonia and just other things you can do for diabetes, what kind of food to eat, and a little menu plan in there. So we'll throw that in as supplies last if you guys want to order that. But it's a great product. And again, Terry does guarantee his items there. And he does the research, folks, so we don't have to as much. So I appreciate that. It's a shame. 1 out of 3 people, I think it was in the book, 1 out of 3 are pre-diabetic now, the Americans at least.
Absolutely. And I think by 2030, half of people might be in that range. It's really crazy, isn't it?
And it's all connected to that metabolic syndrome you're talking about with the high blood pressure and the cholesterol and all that stuff.
Absolutely. It's like a domino effect in the body. And I know that's an image that gets overused, but it's true.
Right.
1 or 2 things starts to go wrong, and then that has a cascade effect on everything downstream. And the next thing you know, you're not just dealing with blood sugar, maybe you're dealing with vision, because the most preventable cause of blindness in America is called diabetic retinopathy, where blood sugar is damaging the blood vessels that feed the eye. So now all of a sudden we're talking about problems with the eye. A lot of people with the number one cause for or need for kidney transplant is diabetes that's caused kidney failure. So, why is that? Because the sugar irritates the heck out of the tiny blood vessels that feed the kidney and it interferes with proper kidney function. Wow. We already talked about, fatty liver disease. Some researchers are starting to call Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes because there's such a strong correlation between problems with diabetes and how you handle blood sugar and the changes that happen in the brain that lead to Alzheimer's disease. So if I could wave a magic wand and fix one thing that would have the most or the best benefits for the most people with health, it would probably be to fix their blood sugar metabolism and help get it back in the normal range again.
You got that right. Okay, too much sugar in the American diet. But what I want to talk about is something we don't get enough of, and that is iodine. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about iodine out there. Most people think of it as something that's should be in our salt. Some people think of it. I know they grab it when there's a nuclear threat. They'll grab some iodine. Let's go into that a little bit, because I think it's just amazing that. I think I was reading the World Health Organization, 15% of the world is deficient in iodine, and we're not getting enough of it. They're used to put it in some of our foods, but now they putting in bromide in as a substitute in some of our these dough conditioners that are in flours and everything, and that's been banned in a lot of European countries. But good old America here, we're using it. So let's talk about iodine. Like, why do we need it? Where does it come from, and how can it help our health?
Well, when we talked earlier about blood sugars, about how to deal with the changes in our diet and how to try to get that back in balance,
right?
That's one part of the equation. The other part of the equation has to do with movement and energy and how efficiently we burn those calories. And the single biggest influence on how we burn calories or how we burn the sugar in our body is the hormone that's made by our thyroid gland. So if your thyroid gland is making too much of this hormone, thyroxine, which is in two forms, the storage form T4 and the active form T3, if it makes too much, you're going to burn your calories too fast. You're going to be too revved up. You're going to have anxiety. You're going to have heart palpitations. You're not going to be able to sleep. Your eyes are starting to, are going to start to protrude. They call that exophthalmos. There's all these things that go along with that. But the majority of people who have problems with their thyroid, it's not that it's making too much, it's making too little. It's sluggish. It's not very efficient. And that with people that the iodine is not, their thyroid gland is not making quite up to what it needs to, they're going to be a little bit depressed. They're going to start to gain weight. Even if they're dieting, they're going to have a real hard time losing weight. They're going to have some hair loss, some eyebrow loss. I call it Mr. Spock syndrome. Do you remember Mr. Spock from Star Trek?
Sure.
Mr. Spock's eyebrows went up, but they didn't come back down again. And that's what happens with thyroid diseases. People, and it's more women than men, but it happens to men too. The eyebrows grow out, they grow up, but then the outer third of the eyebrow starts to fall out. You don't have the rest of your eyebrows missing. There's a lot of different things. And younger women with thyroid dysfunction, it can cause irregular menstrual cycles, very heavy and painful menstrual cycles when they do occur. It can interfere with fertility. It can interfere with ovulation. There's just so many things that if we are not burning our calories efficiently, that it contributes to, whether it's mental status or overweight or fertility. The list goes on and on. The thyroid gland, there is no organ in the body that's more dependent on a single nutrient than iodine is required for the thyroid. So the thyroid gland, if it does not have iodine, it goes into, a crazy state that we call goiter, which comes from iodine deficiency. When women are living in areas where they have children and they don't have enough iodine in their bodies, lack of iodine can cause some cognitive difficulties in newborns. There's just a lot of issues with what goes on with iodine. And you just already outlined some of the reasons why we're struggling. Is that number one is we have less iodine in our food because our crops are grown in increasingly deficient soil. We also have less of it added to food. As you said, it used to be added up until the late 1970s as a dough conditioner for commercial baked goods. Now what do they use? Bromide and brominated flour. That's actually a cousin of iodine, but it's carcinogenic in large quantities. So here you got iodine that's required for life, and now they're using something that is not very healthy for you to do the same thing. Brominated vegetable oils, like in things, citrus soft drinks like Mountain Dew. Mouthfeel, they use brominated vegetable oil. So bromides we're just using a lot of bromides, which is considered a competitor to iodine. There's another competitor to iodine called fluoride. And there's been debates. I'm sure all the folks that are listening know of debates in their area or somewhere else where people are debating about fluoridated water. Do you want fluoride in your water to help prevent cavities? Well, some people say that's a no-brainer. Of course we do. But do you want fluoride in your water that's going to compete with iodine in your body and make you more prone to a lot of different diseases? So there's a lot of, it's not just a matter of not enough iodine in our food. We've actually increased our exposure to cousins of iodine that compete with it in the body. Another one is chlorine and chloride, like bleachers or hot tubs or swimming pool or exposed white coffee filters, white tea bags have all been bleached. And we get a little bit of that chlorine when we ingest them. So now we're in a situation, the perfect storm, where ingestion is going down, 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 and exposure to competitors is going up, up, up. No wonder so many people are having problems with suboptimal thyroid function.
Unbelievable. It's depressing. It's just like we can do such simple things to help the world here. And it's just, they're fighting us. The powers that be seem to be fighting us. I don't want to get conspiratorial, but I guess it all does come down to money a lot of times. What's cheaper to use and things like that. It's a shame. And our bodies, like you said, evolutionary wise, we're just not, I don't think it'll take 1,000 years to adjust to these changes. I would, if we ever do.
Right.
I was reading in Japan, though, they consume so much iodine per day. We don't even get it 1 milligram, less than 1 milligram, where in Japan they're getting up to 13 milligrams per day of iodine. And in Okinawa was supposed to be one of the blue zones or the longest living people there. They get up to 200 milligrams in their diet, in their sea vegetables and fish and things, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the richest source of dietary iodine is in sea vegetables and the fish that eat them. So seafood and sea vegetables. So it makes sense that in countries like Japan, where they rely a lot on seafood and sea vegetables as their diet, that they would have a much higher amount of iodine. So in Japan, you also have people, though, that are no longer eating a traditional diet. They're eating Kentucky Fried Chicken and going to McDonald's, and they're eating they're not quite eating it traditionally.
Right.
And what we notice is, for example, Japanese women eating a traditional diet in Japan have extraordinarily low rates of breast cancer. But if those Japanese women move to the United States, when Japanese women who move to the United States start eating a standard American diet, SAD, that their risk ends up eventually being the same as other women in America.
Right.
So at first people thought, well, maybe it's because they're Japanese. Maybe there's something genetic in their makeup that makes them more resistant to certain kind of cancers. Nope. Once they leave Japan and move to an area where they're eating this kind of westernized diet, all of a sudden you start to see the cancer rates go to the same as the other folks that are living there, regardless of, what country they were originally from.
Wow. Yeah. It's just a side note. I was reading about how it comes from the Greek word iodes or iodes, and it means violet, which is, when it's a gas, that's the color it is. So that was interesting. Yeah, very pretty. Right. Now, I know people use iodized salt, Cheryl, and I don't think that's as bioavailable as what we're talking about. And I also read that it evaporates too pretty quickly, right?
Well, it's kind of ironic. In the Midwestern United States, they used to call that the goiter belt. Because back in the 20s and 30s, if you were living in Indiana, or you living in Iowa, Kansas, Ohio, you weren't getting seafood. You could get lake food, but you weren't getting ocean food, which is the richest source of iodine. So lots of people developed goiters, iodine deficiency. So at the time, the smart people got together and said, what can we do to get more iodine into people? Well, they did start a program of giving chewable iodine tablets to grade schoolers. So once a week they get their chewable iodine tablet to help that way. But then they said, we need to get this out to everybody. And they thought, well, what's something that everybody uses? Aha, it's table salt. So let's start adding iodine to table salt so that when people sprinkle on the salt, they're going to get their dose of iodine too.
Right.
So it sort of makes sense. But here's the bad things that have happened. And number one, people think salt has naturally occurring high levels of iodine, and it does not. So when they use like the much healthier forms of salt that I personally like Celtic gray salt or Himalayan pink salt or the natural salt, sea salt, it does not have very much iodine in it. The second thing is, remember when I said chlorine and chloride are competitors to iodine?
Right.
So when we look at the form of iodine that they are putting in salt is, what's the chemical signal for salt? Sodium chloride, NaCl. So salt itself is that molecule is half of what competes with iodine in the salt.
That's fascinating.
You get a little bit of benefit. You're not going to get goiter, but it's not necessarily going to give you the optimal amount. There's a difference between taking just enough to not get the deficiency syndrome or enough for your organs to survive and thrive and do well.
Well, Cheryl, I know Terry naturally makes they make a great thyroid formula, but they also make the iodine on its own in different milligrams. And how does one know? I mean, is there a test to take as far, because it can range from 1 milligram up to 25 milligrams?
Well, a couple of things is that a lot of the studies were done somewhere between the 6.25 and 12.5 milligram area when you're looking at people that are trying to support, other things, because iodine is required for other things too, like breast health, prostate health, brain health, et cetera.
Right.
But so they use more moderate doses. The other thing is when you say 25 or even 50 milligrams a day, those are some dosage levels that were recommended by Dr. David Brownstein, who is the author of Iodine, Why You Need It, Why You Can't Live Without It.
Yeah.
He's one of the medical professionals that kind of started this iodine revolution. But he uses that as a loading dose to help people get a lot on board and to knock out the competitors. And then he drops down to lower doses for ongoing.
Gotcha.
So when we're looking at thyroid, if your thyroid is maybe not, so bad that they're diagnosing you with a disease, but it's definitely not doing what it's supposed to do, then absolutely for support to help make extra thyroid hormone, you can use the Thyroid Care, which contains a combination of iodine and L-tyrosine, which is an amino acid. And those are the two ingredients. When iodine is used to make thyroid hormone, it always is coupled with L-tyrosine. So we give the thyroid gland exactly what it needs to make the best thyroid hormone. Triiodine is usually more for people who don't have thyroid glands. Maybe they've been removed for surgery or ablated because of other issues, and also for people that are using iodine for things other than what's going on with their thyroid gland. So we kind of have a variety of offerings to help match whatever people need.
Obviously we're not medical professionals, but can someone, or do you know of people that can take some iodine along with their medications at all?
Well, I've not heard of anything of why that would be an issue. If you are on current, but I always encourage people to talk to your doctor.
Sure.
I want to say though that when you use iodine for the first couple months, your thyroid gland or your pituitary gland makes more of a compound called TSH. TSH is a vehicle that moves iodine throughout the body. So temporarily, if people are just relying on the TSH test for their thyroid, the TSH is going to go up and the doctor's going to say, holy guacamole, TSH levels are high. That's a bad sign. Stop everything immediately. No, it's a false positive. It just drives it up temporarily because it uses TSH to help move the iodine through the body. The better and more accurate way to look at thyroid measurement is to measure the actual hormone, which is T3 and T4. So if anybody has a concern after using iodine, I've had people tell me, oh my gosh, I was feeling better. I had better energy. I lost half a pound. There wasn't as much hair in my hairbrush. I really felt like I was in the right direction. Went to the doctor and they told me, oh my gosh, you must stop immediately. And I say, well, talk to them. Here's some resources. Tell them about false positives on TSH. And they need to run the T3 and T4. And then when they actually look at the amount of thyroid hormone, no problem at all.
Wow. Is what was I going to say? I was going to say so much information here. A lot of people come in with the cold hands and feet. Sometimes these are some symptoms, and it's good for people to look up what are some of the symptoms that you might have a low thyroid. How do you feel about? And I'm going back 20 years when I heard about putting a thermometer under your arm, get that axillary temperature. How do you feel about that? Has that changed, or is that kind of a loose way of finding if something you might want to check out about?
Absolutely. For women who have had problems with infertility, one of the ways that they help track when you are ovulating is to track what they call your basal temperature. That is the temperature of your body when you first awaken in the morning before you move or take a sip of water or get coffee or anything. It's like, what's your resting body temperature? And so they track it. And when there's a sudden spike, when that starts to go up, they realize that's because your body temperature goes up when you ovulate. So some people are already used to using this temperature aspect of measuring body temperature. But if you're taking your temperature every single day and it's below, I don't know, 97.8, 97.6, if it's running low, then you need to maybe think about the fact that perhaps your thyroid gland is not doing all that your thyroid gland could. It's not really keeping your body as hot as your body is supposed to be.
Wow. Amazing stuff. Can people find out more about some of Terry's lectures on the internet at all, and some of the things he does, some websites that you can recommend?
Well, we do have, Terry has, the founder of our company also has an information site called Terry Talks Nutrition. And Terry Talks Nutrition is a compilation of videos and third-party information articles and some references to clinical trials with lots of really useful information about the validity of supplements for helping people achieve their most optimal health.
Right, right. Where is Terry these days? Is in Thailand, India? It's like, where's Waldo? You know.
he just got back from France. His grandchildren are equestrians. They are ridiculously good at it.
Oh.
His grandson and granddaughter have decided to make a career of it, and so they went to school. His grandson just graduated, but his granddaughter's still in college for dealing with equestrian issues and show horses and all the different aspects of horse care.
Right,
and he was just over there visiting them. So yeah, Cherry, he never sits around.
He's great.
He's an energizer bunny.
Well, Cheryl, I don't know. You're just fantastic, really. I mean, I can listen to you for hours here. I mean, it's amazing, all that stuff up in your head there. It's just great. I wish I had access to it more often. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it today.
You bet.
Yeah.
We appreciate our visits. Thanks again.
Sure. Thank you. All right, folks, that was Cheryl Myers. Thank you so much for listening today. And by the way, hollyhillvitamins.com. And we got a special code for the show today. It's going to be NUTZ, NUTZ, from Nutrition Nuts. All right. And you'll get 10% off. And if we got enough of the Diabetes is Optional book, we'll throw that in as well. Again, thanks for listening. I think coming up soon is a show on nitric oxide, I think, and it should be a great show for people working out and stuff. And I think we're also doing mushrooms next week as well. So tune in for that. And again, thanks for listening. Take care.